So, hello, everybody. Welcome to the special live stream edition of the School Safety News Podcast. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger, and we're live.
We're live. We are the Educator School Safety Network. Those of you who are not familiar with us and the work that we do, we are a national nonprofit organization, and we provide school safety resources, training, and technical assistance, and we work throughout the United States and Canada. And one of the resources that we do is this series of podcasts. And this podcast, our School Safety News Podcast, is a little bit more serious, where we try to keep educators abreast of what is happening in the world of school safety.
But it's live.
But it is live. So it is up to date because it is live. And then our other podcast is our School Safety Free Period podcast, which we are going to actually be live streaming this week directly after this one. So stick around for that. So are you ready to start with the news?
Yeah. Typically, the way that this works in both of our podcasts and video chats is we talk about some of the things that are happening in schools that are happening in the news. Typically, I describe them, and then we sort of talk about the implications of it and try to have a little bit of a takeaway. So it's not just about admiring the problem. It's really about talking about how these kind of shocking things that occur in the news. Typically, there's an object lesson there for all of us in school safety. Some of them are a little more informal and funny, as in our free period podcast, but more serious is some of the stuff that we talk about here in the school safety news. So unfortunately, there tends to be a theme oftentimes because what does tend to make the news has to do with lockdowns, active shooter, fears of that nature. And so I think that's kind of where we're going to start. And we'll start with sort of the least, and we'll work to the ones that I think are a little bit more concerning.
Well, before you get started, I want to do a couple quick housekeeping things.
Sure.
So people will be listening to this, will be able to hear this normally like a podcast. We will release this as an episode of the podcast. So obviously those folks won't be seeing us now, how we look, and won't be able to join in live in the discussion. But those of you who have joined us for the live stream, please do shoot us questions or comments or concerns or things that you want us to address. Even if it's something, those of you who are not watching this live and it's something that you want us to talk about in a future episode, be sure to do that as well. So.
All right. So who knows what will happen as we go live.
I know I can have a prediction is that a dog will bark.
Yes.
That's my prediction.
Yes,
is that
there will be dog barking
but,
somewhere in this whole thing. So we want to start out with an incident that happened actually just before Christmas. And this was a situation that, we, I guess, could look at it as being something that we maybe would put in our free period podcast because it's funny, sort of, and yet it kind of is cringeworthy, etc. But we had a situation where a student at a middle school, a teacher at a middle school was placed on leave following some comments that were made that were again witnessed by other students. And this particular situation, the teacher said, "I don't believe in guns or have a gun, but if I did, I would shoot you because you have your head down and not paying attention." And so, there is sort of that tone deaf element of really, of all the things that I think I verbalized my frustration as a teacher, I'm not sure that would be the thing that I would go to, let alone the thing that I would go to in 2018, at the end of 2018, after the horrific events.
2019.
No, but at the time,
in the wake
was in
of
2018.
Okay.
And I said it was just before Christmas. See, when we're live, you have to listen. In this particular situation, this particular teacher was placed on administrative leave. The allegations were being investigated. And this is a quote from the school. "It's important to remember that all persons must be presumed innocent until they are proven guilty. As always, the safety, security, and well-being of our students is our top priority." Do keep in mind that there were several other students that witnessed the event. And so again, this just speaks to what we always talk about when we talk about students making threats and not thinking and why are you saying that particular thing? And then we go back and go, "Oh, I think it's a joke," etc. And it does really kind of illustrate how the dynamic has altered in the sense that nobody, other than the person that accidentally says it, nobody really believes that it's okay or that it's funny or that it's a joke. And so that kind of starts us out. I don't know if you have any quick advice or takeaways on that one.
I know, I feel like in this podcast, I feel like we do sort of take an expansive view of school safety, where we're talking a lot about stuff that is professional judgment. And you know, there are things in school safety that there's right answers and there's wrong answers, and there's best practices, and there's what we know from past events and what we know from research. But a lot of this stuff, and I teach in the school law courses that I teach, a lot of this stuff boils down to professional judgment.
Yeah.
And
we would say, oh, well, you didn't have adequate training. You might not have known, whatever. I'm not sure that this was really a training concern. This was just being really tone deaf to what you're saying. And it makes you wonder sometimes. You know, I think that oftentimes we have educators that don't have good classroom management skills. And they don't have a way to deal with things that are maybe more appropriate or more effective. And they kind of default to humiliation-based punishments or these sort of shocking, provocative statements with the notion that somehow that's going to shock you into behaving better. And I think clearly that did not happen. The next two that we want to talk about have more to do with a school as an organization, a school's reaction to a particular event. So this again was in 2018, just before Christmas. And this was a school where a threat was found inside a bathroom stall. And as we know, and we talk about it in a lot of our research, that's a very, very common location. If you find a threat in a school, more than 53% of the time, it's going to be in the restroom.
I would ask to some of our viewers and some of our listeners, is that commensurate? Is that a surprise to you? Is that commensurate with your experience? I mean, there's a part of me before we really found that about the threats in the bathrooms in our research that was like, you know, it's the 20 teens. Like, who's writing threats in, you know, there must be all on social media. So I really would be curious to hear from all of you. Is that commensurate with your experience, or is that really shocking and surprising to you all? So
and the bathroom thing, but I guess before we get to the real takeaway, the mini takeaway is, then why are you not supervising your bathrooms a little better? I'm not saying that I want to be hanging out in a bathroom, you know, with handing out, what do? Do they hand out little towels and, you know,
wet naps.
I am not in any way suggesting that, but if we were doing strategic supervision in a school, we might have people occasionally go through there or stick their head in there or make sure of what's happening in that particular
how do we strike a balance between, I'm a bathroom attendant,
right,
and we have absolute chaos and pandemonium,
and I'm not going in there no matter what,
because it's, you know, Lord of the Flies in that bathroom.
So in this particular case, they had a threat that was found in the bathroom, and that's not really my issue. It's interesting, though, in the response, the security measures in the response were detailed in an email sent to parents. So it's good that we are notifying parents. But all students will go through metal detectors each day until further notice. So there's my first sigh of, that's our very best response to a threat. Okay. All student possessions are subject to be searched.
Is it middle school?
Yes. No, this is a high school. The next day was declared as a soft lockdown day. So in advance, we have determined that we need to go through metal detectors, search you, and we're going to lock everyone in. We've determined that in advance based on a threat in the bathroom. Okay. As part of the lockdown, students will not be permitted to go off campus for lunch. And anyone that has open campus, that always gives me a bit of an issue. So maybe that's not so bad. Any student caught outside the building will be given a 1-day out of school suspension. There will be a, quote, heavy police presence in and around the building, and students will be required to use the school's bridges without exception to travel to and from classes. So we are searching kids. We are limiting their mobility. We are doing an awful lot of things that sound very punitive based on this threat. And so I guess that poses a question that I'd like to, you know, have people sort of reflect on. Can we punish threats out of kids? So can we be so punitive, and can we be so authoritarian that we can get kids to not make threats? Is that in reality an effective way to deal with threats?
But they didn't actually find the person. There was no direct consequence for the person.
Well, let me continue with the other security measures.
Okay.
Students will also face suspension if caught opening a door for anyone. This includes brother, sister, mother, father, etc. So they cannot open doors and let people in. Again, probably a good practice. I would prefer that we teach kids the rationale behind why it's important as opposed, and this whole response on the part of the school really sort of centers around the idea of we are going to force you with compliance.
And put my boot on your throat until you make this school safer.
And please don't understand, I'm not saying that there isn't the necessity for a response. There is.
Sure.
This is the part that makes me a little bit sad. This is a quote from the email. This is the only way we continue to keep our community safe. We are a family and this is our home away from home. Everyone must take ownership of their environment. We understand everyone has issues, but being mindful they can be resolved. So if we take the words of that, we are a community. We are a family. This is the only way we can be safe is for me to surveil you, to contain you. And again, I'm not saying that they should be holding hands, singing Kumbaya, wishing that there wasn't a threat. They need to take action. They need to be proactive. They need to investigate. But we need to put drama onto this?
Well, and there's a cost. The measures that you, and as in all of these things, it's trying to strike a balance. We can't just say we're going to, hold hands and think positive thoughts back and forth to each other until we stop having an issue with threats at our school. We have to strike a balance, but I am concerned of what is the consequence and what is the implication of school safety by I'm going to have my boot on your throat until we make the school safer.
And it really kind of speaks to not that these are bad people or not that this is a terrible school. It really speaks to the lack of tools that we have given people. We don't provide adequate training. We don't give administrators and educators tools to come at this issue of, oh no, I have a threat, and to come at it from multiple perspectives. We instead, and again, not a knock on law enforcement, but this is a very law enforcement based response. Because I'm going to lock this place down. We're going to, and I want to end this particular story by telling you what the actual threat was in the bathroom. The threat said, and I'm quoting from the threat, and they have a photo of it. You will all pay 12/5, which is the date.
It's not that specific.
Not specific.
Or credible of a threat.
Not credible. And so again, and I understand it's very easy for me to sit here and make judgments about that, but regardless of whether you agree or disagree with what occurred, we have to reflect a bit on, would there be other approaches to this particular threat that would have not had substantial damage or heaping insult onto injury in terms of the climate and culture of the school and the way that the kids are, because is that really a family? We're really a family. I don't trust you. I'm searching you, and so there's just such a discord between those two that I think makes it problematic.
And, aside from, whatever sort of impact these approaches had on that actual threat or threats in the future, there were kids in that school who maybe felt disconnected to begin with. And so what is the,
what did we really prevent, or what did we provoke?
I mean, there is a cost, there's an unintended consequence for that thing. And then also, aside from the how effective was it really for accomplishing the thing that we sought out to do.
And so that's, and again, the reason that I chose that one to cover is it's kind of sad in a way that this is where the school found itself. And, again, I'm sure there's extenuating circumstances, et cetera, but could there have been an approach that would provide supports and interventions, not just, we need to put the hammer down here. And then I guess our last one that we want to finish up with was this occurred in Florida. And the only reason that I give you that location again in early December is because it is Florida, knowing what we know with the tragedy at Parkland. So we have a school in Florida that decided to have a realistic lockdown drill. And it was a code red drill. So we can also talk about the whole code particular issue. At a code red drill, and they ended up with a situation where people believe there was an active shooter on the campus. There were a lot of reports of students that were crying, running for their lives, panic attacks. Some students were trampled. Some students actually were injured in it. There's lots of consternation and upset parents. But here's the thing. It was announced. during the regular instructional day, students and teachers were alerted to an announcement that the school was on code red and that it was not a drill. So, and the idea, I guess, was that we want this to be realistic. So if we want it to be realistic in the sense that we are practicing traumatizing students, we're practicing chaos, we're practicing
like a lifelong,
we're practicing,
screaming for people dealing with this.
Then exactly that's, but I don't think that's what that school really intended to practice.
Specifically with this being in Florida, with some of the stuff with the Parkland Commission report coming out not that long ago, we know for a fact that part of the problem and part of the difficulty that they had responding at Parkland is that there was confusion.
Was the confusion
on that
pandemonium?
Day.
Yeah.
No, but there was confusion on that day of, is this a drill or is this an event? There was confusion.
But also confusion of what should, of the chaos of just people panicking.
There's going to be there's going to be chaos and panic when you have an event. That's going to happen. But we have to control the notion of, is this a drill? Is this not a drill? And I have yet to hear anyone tell me a compelling rationale for having that confusion of, is this a drill? Is this not a drill? So there's what happened at Parkland, which was there was confusion. This maybe is a drill. That was to the detriment of the folks inside that school. And as you talk about here and in other instances that we've seen where people are in drills but think it's real, and that is also to the detriment of the drill.
Yep.
And so, I
don't know what we were practicing. Let me just finish by let me expand a bit on this just to kind of give you an idea. It wasn't just a poorly planned announcement. So the teachers received an alert that there was an active shooter on campus on their phones. Mm-hmm. Panic began to spread. And the teacher, in one particular case, told the students that there was an alert for an active shooter. After 30 minutes, the teachers were finally alerted that it was an unannounced code red drill. And so there was a lot of questions.
Here's the problem with this, doing this as a live stream, as a video, is I have no poker face for this. What? They did 30 minutes where people thought that they were maybe going to die?
Yeah.
And I do not understand how there has not been serious litigation on this yet. How has someone has not? I mean, I assume behind the scenes there have been settlements where people are not allowed to disclose the details of the case. I do not understand how there has not school districts taking an absolute bath on this.
There's a little bit more. So after 30 minutes, they're finally alerted, and then the article talks about there was a follow-up intercom announcement made during the lunch hour. So this is
later,
about an hour after the
when
initial
we're less
one.
Upset, but still
no,
upset.
They were trying to clarify that the code red was a drill and wasn't real. But because of the poor quality of the speaker, no one could tell what they were saying, and that escalated the panic because it sounded like, you're not hearing anything and you don't know what's going on, and someone is talking. And so, and students, at least according to the media reports, the students continue to believe, even at that lunch period, that there was an active shooter on the premises, because all they could hear in the intercom announcement was code red several more times. So when they're making the explanation, trying to explain about the code red drill, etc., I'll read the quote from her. Nobody could hear. We thought there was another code red. And I remember just feeling my heart go down to my stomach, and I threw my food to the ground. She goes on to recount a mass uproar and exodus from the cafeteria as students hear more announcements about code red, code red, code red. She herself believed that there was an active shooter, and so a lot of students ran out of the school. So there were a lot of things happening by that. Even the school officials came around to check on the doors. People didn't realize that it was a drill. So, I mean, again, we want to, I always try to come down on the side of school administrators and trying to defend the difficult position that administrators are in. Yeah. But I don't really understand how we can justify as a training vehicle that there is some inherent value in demonstrating to kids that we don't know what we're doing, because they already believe that.
Yeah.
They already understand that in many places we don't know what we're doing. Yeah. And they are already anxious. I don't know that we need to heighten their anxiety. I don't know that we need to prove that an active shooter could happen here, because these kids quickly and easily believed it. Yeah. And then, of course, the final sort of icing on the cake is, of course, what do students start doing? And again, I can't blame the students there. They start texting their parents.
Yeah, of course.
And so now we've got, clearly, so we have traumatized kids. We have a drill with no training value whatsoever. So we didn't accomplish anything that's going to help in the future. We have a public relations nightmare. And now we have a credibility issue moving forward when we do have an actual event, or when we do want to have a drill, or when we do want to do something differently. So, I mean, it's these ill-informed sort of, well, let's just kind of, let's do a drill. Let's see what happens, is not the approach to school safety, to say, let's just kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
And even letting it play out, any kid that is sitting in any school for an hour believing there's an active shooter on campus, that is unacceptable.
And there's no reason, and there is no utility. There is nothing to be gained from that. Wow. And we hear of cases of this before. This isn't the first one that I've heard of. That one's a little shocking. That one's a little, maybe we could turn our phones off before the live stream. We can't control the dogs, but we could turn our phones on.
Maybe somebody was going to call me in the middle of it, but not.
That is a little egregious, even for what we do. I do want to, before we wrap up, quick jump back to the second thing we talked about. One of the viewers, we were talking about the school that had the threat and how draconian the response was of the school. And Julie, one of the viewers, said that it's the opposite of their kid's school. They said that her kid's school, they had a verbal threat made to the teacher's face, and they've been considered a joke. So,
well, and there were a number of them, if I would have had time to get to that, where, there are other instances where you have parents who are really upset because nothing did happen, and they're quite aware of it. Now, the only caution I'm going to put out there from putting on my administrative hat is, as an administrator, you're really kind of caught in the conundrum of, I can't divulge all this information about here's what was really said, and here's what really happened, and here's what I did. And so you're sort of caught in not being able to divulge the things that would exonerate the school. But yet people get selective pieces of it and kind of go to town. And that could be true for any of the things that we've talked about. But that being said, we also have to acknowledge that there are a lot of not great decisions that are made in the name of school safety, that are either driven by, we don't want anyone to know, we don't want to overreact, we don't want bad PR, we're just doing what law enforcement tells us to, that are driven by a lot of reasons other than this is what is best for kids, and this is what makes sense from a school safety perspective. And so whether it's an underreaction or an overreaction, both of those are equally problematic. And it's difficult to hit that sweet spot. I get that. But then that again speaks to why we need more training and more resources, and we need to get educators involved in these discussions and these decisions so that we can think through the implications of what would happen if we wanted to have a very realistic lockdown drill. How could we do that without descending into trauma and chaos? How could we respond to a threat in a way that will investigate and demonstrate to parents that we're serious without, booting a kid out of school because he chewed his Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun? How do we hit that sort of sweet spot? And that, I think, is a big challenge, but it is the reality of what we as educators need to do. So we have two choices. We can either continue to flail around and just kind of wing it and see what happens, if that's the theme, I guess, or we can provide training, and we can take advantage of training and resources and really build our professional practice so that we have the capability to make good decisions where school safety is concerned.
Yeah, and I would add just sort of two things to that. When you talk about building our educational practice, really in making sure that we are incorporating school safety concerns or school safety training into our educational practice. Not that it's an extra thing that we get around to when we have time, or it's something that,
which is kind of why some of these things happen. If we're shortchanging it, it's the last thing on the list. And we find ourselves behind the 8 ball of, oh no, we have to have a drill, or, oh, this parent's upset, I'm going to do a knee-jerk reaction instead of being strategic in our plan.
Yeah. And sometimes we see places where, this is sort of seen as this is the purview of law enforcement. So it's not part of my professional practice. Or we have an in-house coordinator of school safety, so it's not part of my professional practice. So I think you raise a really good point of incorporating it into professional practice. And then the other thing is something that I feel like we talk about a lot of impactful and effective communication with parents in the community. You talk about how it's difficult to hit that sweet spot of a reaction. That's true. It is very difficult, but you can mitigate some of the problems if you if you're not able to make a perfect decision, maybe sometimes you can't, but you can mitigate some of those problems by having good communication with parents. That, we had a threat, and as opposed to acting like, well, we didn't, or it didn't happen, or we didn't have a drill, or we didn't have kids that were upset, that we're being proactive in our communication with parents so that you're able to control the narrative and that you're able to keep that asset of trust and reputation from your parents and your stakeholders. So, and again, that's another thing that doesn't happen by accident and doesn't happen on the fly when you're winging it. So that's something that training and preparation and policies and procedures of being able to do those things successfully.
So that's kind of the theme of this first live cast. Let's not wing it, but yet
let's not wing.
We're kind of winging.
Let's not wing it here on the live cast
podcast. So there's that irony that we managed to infuse into our first live stream.
Well, so we thank everyone who joined us on the live stream. If you are listening to this on the podcast, you can always find us anywhere that you get your podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. I don't think on Spotify. I couldn't figure out how to get Spotify to work. Places where you normally get your podcast. You can also listen to the podcast directly on our website. And if you're on our website, you can check out all of the other free resources that we have available there for folks. And if you ever have any questions or comments or concerns or something that you want us to address on a future episode, like we were able to talk about Julie's question here today, you can always email us at info@eschoolsafety.org. Hopefully people will stick around. We're in 3 minutes. We're going to do a live stream of the School Safety Free Period podcast, which is we're involving a lot of giggling on my end. Hopefully to be.
You think that's going to make people want to stay?
Well, to be completely transparent, I'm not sure if we're going to be in the exact same URL. So we're going to end this stream. Hopefully we'll be able to get everybody back on the same stream, and I will probably just go ahead and tweet out the URL in case it is different. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Bye.